This happened 3 years ago. I was 32 and working as a nurse at a busy urban hospital. Night shifts were my regular routine. I thought I could handle anything. But one week felt different. The lights flickered more, and the sounds in the emergency room were sharper. I couldn't shake the feeling that on my third night that week, I entered the ICU. The machines beeped steadily, a low hum that was almost soothing. I glanced at a patient who'd been unresponsive for days. Suddenly, he whispered my name. I blinked, thinking I misheard. I was tired. When I looked back, he locked eyes with me. A chill shot down my spine. I checked his vitals, and everything was stable. I tried convincing myself it was just fatigue. I passed the nurse's station. They were busy, laughing. No one else seemed to notice what I'd seen. The following night, I was in the corridor, gathering supplies. That's when I noticed the shadows flickering by the nurse's station. My heart raced. I stood still. I squinted into the dim light, but nothing was there. I told myself it was just the lighting. My arms felt prickly, and I was on edge. Later, I walked down a long hallway. The echo of footsteps filled the air behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one. My palms were clammy against a clipboard I held. Maybe I was just tired again. I focused on my duties, trying to shake off the unease. Then Sarah, another nurse, pulled me aside. Her face was pale. She mentioned a patient who died years ago in the same ICU room. Strange things had happened since. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't know if I believed her, but I felt uneasy as the week lingered on. I sensed that cold presence growing stronger. I entered one patient's room, and the air turned heavy. My hand shook as I read the chart. Suddenly, I heard someone whisper my name again. I turned, but the room was empty. Just as I decided to leave, a cold breeze brushed my arm. My heart raced. I dashed out of the room, shutting the door behind me. Later that night, the corridor was eerily quiet. I sensed something watching me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him again, the patient from the ICU. His lips moved, but his voice didn't come out. I felt frozen. I tried to convince myself this was yet another trick of my mind. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. Panic set in, and I turned to rush away. But as I moved, the air around me seemed to waver. It felt like I was being pulled back. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. I stumbled, looking over my shoulder. The patient still stood there, his eyes piercing into me. "You're lost," he said quietly, his voice echoing in my mind. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Was I dreaming? The darkness thickened around me. I wanted to scream, but could only gasp for breath. Just as I managed to dart away, I felt a fragile hand grip my wrist. I spun around, ready to fight, but there was nothing there. I was alone. The hall was quiet once more, but my surroundings felt wrong. I knew I was not alone, but I couldn't see anyone. I stood shaking, questioning everything. What was real? What was my imagination? That night, I knew I'd never be able to explain what happened, and I still can't. I took a deep breath and tried to ground myself in reality. I had to focus on my job. The patients needed me, even if the flickers of shadow and the whispers haunted me. It was another night, and the hospital was just as busy. I tried to shake off the strange events from last week. Maybe I could just forget it all. I pushed through another shift. I couldn't help but glance at the ICU doors. They loomed in the dim light, and I felt an urge to avoid them. I kept my distance, sticking to my routine. Still, I couldn't ignore the icy fingers of anxiety wrapping around my chest. I spotted Sarah again during a break. She was sipping coffee, her gaze distant. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to ease into the conversation. "Not really." She shuddered. "It's getting worse, the things in the ICU. Last night, I could have sworn I saw someone standing at the end of the hallway. But when I checked, there was nothing." I tried to reassure her, but a nagging fear crept back into my mind. What if the patient I had seen was just the beginning? We shared stories, and then I decided to step out of the break room. I needed air. As I walked outside, the night sky felt heavy above me. I didn't want to go back in, but I had no choice. I was reminded that my shift was far from over. Reluctantly, I pushed back through the automatic doors. Just as I entered the ICU, a sudden chill washed over me. My breath fogged the air. I scanned the room. and my heart sank as I spotted the empty bed where the patient had once been. He hadn't moved, yet I felt an undeniable presence squeezing against me. That S when I heard a soft giggle echoing from the far corner. I turned, but no one was there. Panic rose in my chest. "Hello," I called out, already knowing there would be no answer. "Nothing." I shrugged it off, attributing it to fatigue. But just as I turned away, something cold brushed against my arm again. I froze, a shiver running through me. Determined to focus, I walked toward one of my patients. As I checked their vitals, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Out of habit, I glanced over my shoulder. The hallway was empty, but I felt the weight of a gaze heavy against my back. I jerked around quickly, my heart pounding. That S when I saw it. A figure, translucent yet unmistakable, hovered near the nurse's station. Time stood still as I recognized the face of the patient who whispered my name. He looked unwell, his features marred with a sense of desperation. "Help me," he mouthed silently, his eyes pleading. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if he was real. A sudden realization pierced through me. I had to know more about this patient. Who was he? What did he want? Before I could think any further, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into near darkness. I felt my stomach drop. There was a loud crash from down the hallway. Instinctively, I rushed toward the sound. My heart was pounding in my ears, and just before reaching the source, I stumbled. A box of supplies lay strewn across the floor. As I righted myself, I heard it again, the boyish giggle, sharper this time, teasing me from the shadows. Someone was in the hospital with me. Or something. I took a step back, wanting to run, but I felt a pull toward the origin of the laughter. Curiosity battled against fear. "What do you want?" I called out. Silence. The answer eluded me. My heart raced as I stood frozen in place, knowing this was only the beginning. Whatever was happening around me was far from over, and I was determined to find out why. I hesitated, my breath caught in my throat. The laughter echoed off the sterile walls, taunting me, and I felt the urge to retreat wash over me. But my feet didn't move. The atmosphere felt thick, almost alive, as if the very air around me whispered secrets I was too afraid to uncover. Trying to shake off my fear, I walked deeper into the ICU. I didn't want to seem cowardly not now, when I felt so close to an answer. Yet, the shadow of the laughter lingered in my mind, daring me to explore further. Each room I passed felt hollow, occupied by sleeping bodies who were blissfully unaware of the strange happenings around them. I peered into one glance and saw a nurse adjusting in foredrip. She glanced up and offered me a reassuring smile. "Everything all right?" she asked. I forced a nod, but my heart wasn't in it. "Just checking on things," I muttered, my uncertainty palpable. I turned the corner towards the break room. The laugh came again. It was softer, more playful. It sent a chill down my spine. This time, it was accompanied by a sudden gust of cold air that whipped through the hallway. I paused, my focus shifting to the end of the corridor. A flicker of movement caught a small shape darting across the floor just outside the pediatric ward. "Hello," I called out, stepping closer. My voice bounced helplessly off the walls as I approached the ward. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and dimmed. I felt exposed, like a moth drawn to a flame. As I stepped into the room, the sight struck me like a slap. Toys were scattered across the floor, colorful plush animals, a toy race car, a tiny rubber dinosaur. It looked like a child had just left the room in a hurry. But that wasn't what grabbed my full attention. At the far end of the room, in the shadows, I caught the silhouette of a small figure. It was too small to be an adult. Fear gripped me. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure turned, and there was a moment of silence before I heard a small, soft voice. "You shouldn't be here," it said. The words echoed hauntingly through the empty room. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Why?" I asked, but the childlike figure began to dissolve into the shadows, leaving behind only a faint silver glimmer. Just before it completely faded, it whispered, "Help my friend," before vanishing entirely. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. I had so many questions and felt so utterly alone. What friend? I whispered to the empty room. The weight of my responsibility pressed down on me, heavier than I could bear. I turned in haste to escape the room, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror on the wall. I looked pale, haunted, but that wasn't the worst part. Just behind me, barely visible, was another ghostly face, staring intently, mouth forming a silent scream. In sheer panic, I whirled around, nothing there. Just the empty hallway, cold and silent. I needed answers, but I had to stay grounded. Taking a deep breath, I decided to head back to the nurse's station. Maybe I could find Sarah or someone else who had experienced these strange occurrences. Just then, the lights flickered again, this time plunging me into darkness. I stood still, heart racing. My next move would be crucial. I had to uncover the truth, and deep down I feared it could be worse than I had imagined. I hesitated in the dark, surrounded by a heavy silence that felt almost suffocating. I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears, a relentless reminder of how vulnerable I was. Stay calm, I whispered to myself, though my voice sounded shaky and unsure. Slowly, I began to retrace my steps. The dim emergency exit sign at the end of the hall was my only beacon. As I moved, the unsettling feeling still clung to me, as though I was being watched. The silence felt thick, almost deliberate. When I reached the nurse's station, it was empty. My gut twisted with unease. I remembered Sarah. Just a few moments ago, she had seemed pleasant and unbothered. Where was she now? I glanced around, but the bustling hub of nurses and doctors felt like a distant memory. Suddenly, I heard again, a faint, tinkling laugh. It rippled through the dark, far away, but it was enough to send chills racing down my spine. "Who is there?" I called, hoping for a response that never came. Instead, the laughter echoed back at me, mingled with faint cries. Tension prickled at the edges of my mind. I had to keep moving. The break room door stood ajar, just ahead. Maybe I could find answers there. As I stepped inside, the lights above flickered back to life. The room was untouched, revealing remnants of broken coffee cups and an old vending machine. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange on the table, a small toy dinosaur, identical to the one I had seen in the pediatric ward. How had it gotten here? It felt raw and displaced. I reached out, my fingers brushing its smooth surface. A voice broke the silence. "Don't touch that." The words were sharp, harsh. I spun around to find a figure at the doorway, a nurse. Her face twisted in a mix of fear and urgency. "You shouldn't be here. You'll only make it worse." "Make what worse?" I demanded, the frustration spilling out. "What's going on?" She hesitated, her eyes darting back toward the hallway. "It's the children. They're restless. They need help." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And you've already drawn attention." My breath caught in my throat again. "What children?" But as I spoke, I realized I could hear gentle whispers coming from the hallway. It was nearly a melodic hum, weaving through the walls, calling to me, beckoning me to follow. "Do not listen to them," the nurse hissed, stepping forward. Her expression hardened, panic intertwining with something more desperate. "You don't know what you're dealing with." They could be persuasive, yet a part of me felt drawn to the sounds. "I have to," I insisted, driven by an unfathomable urge that burned within me. I took a step toward her, fully intent on digging deeper. Before I could react, the lights went out again, plunging us into pitch darkness. I felt a rush of cold air engulf me, and in a sudden flash, the whispers morphed into chaotic cries. Shadows darted around me, and I knew then I wasn't alone. I needed to escape this room. But that was when the temperature plummeted even more, and I could make out silhouettes flitting from one corner to another. They were small, just like the child I'd seen earlier. "Help us," they chorused, their voices intertwining in a haunting melody. That S when I realized, deep down, this was far more than I had prepared for. They weren't just lost, they were trapped. And I was the one person who could either help or haunt them forever. I clutched the toy dinosaur, a sense of wrongness vibrating through my fingertips. The shadows danced closer. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, wrapping around me like a cold fog. "Help us," they pleaded, and for a moment, I hesitated, caught between fear and compassion. Suddenly, the nurse lunged for me, grabbing my arm. "You need to leave. Now." Her grip was tight, her breath uneven. Panic flickered in her eyes like a candle about to extinguish. I felt her urgency press against my chest, but the cries continued, urging me toward the door. "Why won't you help them?" I asked, my voice shaky. The sounds around me swirled, growing louder, almost overwhelming. "Because you don't know what they truly are," she shouted, her voice barely cutting through the chaos. It made my blood run cold. "You can't trust them. They're not safe. We don't know how they became this way, but if you go out there," before she could finish, the lights flickered back on. The sudden illumination cut through the shadows and revealed the room around us. I saw the nurse's face, lined with desperation and fear. More shadows lingered just outside the break room, exit. Their small forms darted, almost teasingly, just out of sight. Taking a deep breath, I pulled away from her grip. "I have to see. I can't just leave them." "No," she cried, but her voice was drowned out by the shrill hum of the whispers intensifying. "Please." I stepped toward the exit against my better judgment. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching into an abyss. As I pulled the door further open, the air shimmered with dread. I couldn't ignore the fear in her eyes, yet the children's cries echoed within me, a siren call I couldn't resist. As I entered the hall, I turned back for just a moment. The nurse stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale, shadows clawing at her hair. "You'll regret this," she warned softly. With her threatening words ringing in my ears, I moved further into the hall. The whispers were clearer now, forming words I could almost understand. "Help us," they insisted. The sound wrapped around me, filling me with a deep sense of purpose. I approached the end of the hall, and that's when I saw a door slightly ajar, light spilling from the crack, illuminating whatever lay beyond. My heart raced as I neared it. I could see silhouettes darting past the glass pane, small hands reaching out, desperate for freedom. Just as I reached for the doorknob, the warmth of the light was extinguished, plunging the hallway back into darkness. The whispers turned into screams, a cacophony of despair that ripped through the air. "Don't leave us." I recoiled, the sudden shift knocking the breath from my lungs. Something was deeply wrong. The shadows became more than just figures. They twisted into shapes, hovering just out of reach. Then, from the darkness, I heard a distinct voice, a child's voice, clear as crystal. "Please help me." In that moment, I knew that stepping through that door would change everything. I felt my resolve teetering on the edge. Would I find the answers I sought, or would I unlock something far worse? I took one hesitant step forward, knowing I had little time to decide. I pushed the door open just a crack, bracing myself against the swell of darkness. The quiet felt thick, almost suffocating, like the air just seconds before a storm. I could see faint outlines moving just inside, shadows shifting like something alive. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against my ears. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. It felt odd to break the stillness, but the urge to know kept propelling me forward. I stepped further inside, cautiously scanning the room. It was small and cramped, an old storage closet filled with boxes of expired medical supplies. The light bulb flickered uncertainly, casting more shadows than it illuminated. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I had expected something, maybe a glimpse of those who had cried out for help. But all I found were remnants of forgotten tasks and old paperwork stuffed in dusty corners. Then I caught movement from the edge of my vision. I turned sharply to see a figure slipping behind a stack of boxes. My pulse quickened. "Who is there?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing but silence. I took a step closer. The figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, but I could have sworn I glimpsed a small face peeking at me. Heart racing, I leaned in a little too far. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway behind me. I whipped around, my heart pounding against my chest. The nurse? Had she come to drag me back? "Help!" I whispered to myself, feeling foolish and scared. But the stillness returned. I turned back toward the boxes, instinct drawing me nearer. My fingers brushed against the edge of a box labeled children's supplies. That label struck a chord deep within me. With a flick of the wrist, I opened it, revealing a tangle of colorful toys and blankets. Then, beneath it all, I saw something shiny. I reached deeper into the box until my fingers wrapped around a small, metallic object. A key? I pulled it out and examined it under the flickering light. It was old, worn, but it had an ornate shape unlike any I had seen before. Where does this belong? I wondered aloud, my mind racing. Just then, the door slammed shut, halting my thoughts and sending an icy chill down my spine. I stumbled back, adrenaline spiking in my veins. Who was playing games? I snapped, but indignation masked my fear. No answer came, only the steady hum of an overhead light. Then the whispers returned, softer now, but more urgent. Find us, they coiled around me like ribbons, beckoning me deeper into the darkness. It was as if the very walls were alive with the echoes of those trapped within. My fingers gripped the key tighter, a lifeline to whatever lay ahead. What am I supposed to find? Where do I go now? I was caught between instinct and reason, terrified and captivated at the same time. It felt like I had stepped into a trap I could not see, a game with rules I didn't understand. I took a deep breath and glanced back toward the door. It was still shut tight, and darkness swallowed up any hope of escape. I had to know what the key unlocked. Floating in the air was the same voice from before, more insistent now. Help us, it was time to face whatever awaited me in this abandoned realm. With a deep breath, I turned and headed toward the only other door in the room, pregnant with uncertainty and anticipation. I approached the other door slowly, my heart pounding louder with every cautious step. The whispers surged, urging me on. Help us, they blended into a distant hum, like trapped voices reaching for someone to hear them. I placed my hand on the knob, a feeling of icy dread creeping up my spine. Twisting the knob, I was met with resistance. It felt stuck, but desperation fueled my resolve. I pushed harder, and it creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway that stretched into the unknown. A heavy air filled my lungs as I crossed the threshold. The hallway was narrow, lined with faded photographs hanging crookedly on the walls. Each picture showed smiling children, all in white hospital gowns, but with lost eyes, like they were peering right through me. I shivered, the sensation of being watched growing stronger. Somehow, I knew I was walking into something more than just an empty hallway that in front of me. A flickering light cast unsettling shadows. I paused, recalling the key in my pocket. I felt the cool metal against my skin, and I hesitated to pull it out. But somewhere down the hall, I heard a soft crying noise, a muffled sound of distress. Is someone there? I called again. No response came, only the persistent weeping that seemed to weave in and out of the shadows. Swallowing my fear, I took a step toward the source of the sound. Each footfall echoed like a drum, enhancing the oppressive silence around me. Then I spotted a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. The cries were clearer now, a small child wailing in pain. My feet moved on instinct, quickening as I reached the door. The key jangled as I approached, and I fumbled for it, feeling a spark of urgency that drowned out my terror. But I pushed the door open and gasped. The room was filled with old medical equipment, but the air was stale and heavy, mingling with an overwhelming perfume of antiseptic. In the center, a small bed sat empty, the sheets rumpled as if someone had just been there. On the far side, I spotted a figure small, curled up in the corner. Hey, are you okay? I stepped closer, the crying morphing into whimpering sobs. But it only deepened my unease. Shadows loomed larger around me, and with each step, I felt a chill creeping up my spine. And then it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. I turned sharply, but the space was empty. Just silence and soft moans. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the creeping dread. I'm here to help you, I said, trying to sound strong, though my voice faltered. That S when I felt it, a cold breath against the back of my neck. I froze, eyes widening. Something was standing behind me. Then everything went dark. The overhead light buzzed and cut out, plunging me into an all-consuming black. The only sound were the labored breathing of the child and my frantic heartbeat. I reached for the doorknob, but it felt hot, like a warning not to escape. "Find us," the whisper came again, echoing in the darkness. It wrapped around me, more insistent, demanding. I turned back, confronting the shadow that loomed. It felt like a presence, something waiting for me to act. Just as panic threatened to take hold of me, I grabbed the key from my pocket, clenching it tight. I had to unlock an answer, something that could break the spell this place had cast over me. "What do you want?" I yelled, my voice breaking through the thick silence. A soft light flickered back to life, illuminating the room just enough for me to see a child's face, eyes wide and filled with fear. I felt a pull, a thread of connection that told me this was only the beginning. There was much more hidden in this darkness. The light flickered intermittently, giving me just enough illumination to make out the child's features. He looked no older than 8, his thin frame hunched against the wall. "Help me," he whispered, his voice strained and raw. Fresh chills raced over me, sending my heart into overdrive. "Where are you hurt?" I asked, inching closer. I was acutely aware of the shadows creeping along the walls, as if they were alive, eager for the next moment of fear to unfold. He didn't move, just stared at me, eyes brimming with unshed tears that reflected the dim light. "Not me," he said, shaking his head slightly. "You have to help them." His words wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, suffocating. "Who?" I pressed, desperation now clawing at me. But instead of answering, he pointed toward the far corner of the room. My heart sank as I followed his gaze. There, half hidden behind an old gurney, lay another child, pale, unmoving. Panic surged as I rushed to kneel beside the child. "Hey, wake up," I said, shaking him gently. His skin felt cold, and my fingertips brushed against something slick blood. Or was it just my imagination? I felt the nausea rise in my throat. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed in the room, and I recoiled, heart racing. The shadows danced menacingly, and I could nearly hear them whispering. I scrambled back, eyes darting around, trying to make sense of the chaos. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice sounding increasingly desperate as I glanced between the two boys. "Please," the first child cried, "we need to escape." I returned my focus to him, the dread pooling in my stomach. "What do you mean? How can we escape?" He hesitated, his gaze drifting back to the gurney. "The door, it locks," he murmured. "We must find the key." My mind raced. I remembered the small key in my pocket. Was it meant for this door? But how could I trust it? The shadows flickered again around me, intensifying my fears. The low whispers now crescendoed into a chorus, rising and falling like waves crashing in a storm. Each one demanded help, a haunting plea I couldn't ignore. "I can't stay here," I said, voice strained. "I will find help." But as I rose, the air felt thick, heavier than before. Something shifted behind me, and I sensed an ominous presence, the shadow, looming larger, swallowing up the edges of the light. "Don't leave us," the children wailed together, their voices merging into one heart-wrenching call. I faltered, torn between the urgency to escape and the haunting pull to stay. Just then, the room started to shake, the walls vibrating with a low rumble. The photos on the walls rattled, the children's smiles morphing into twisted frowns. I stepped back, dread flooding my veins. They were no longer just pictures. They looked like they were guarding secrets. "Find us," the whispers demanded again, the pressure mounting as if they could rip the building apart. I turned back to the child in the corner and found he was gone, leaving behind nothing but a faint echo of his sobs. I was left standing alone, the flickering light casting eerie shapes around me. "What has happened?" I whispered into the charged air, feeling more lost than ever. In that moment, I realized that escape might not just be a matter of finding the door. Something else lurked here, something tied to the very fabric of the hospital. I had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As I caught my breath, a cold draft swept across the room, wrapping around me like a taunting embrace. I took a step toward the door, but then heard a faint rumble from behind me, followed by a whisper that almost made my blood run cold. "You must stay." I froze, heart pounding as the whisper echoed my mind. "You must stay." The sound came from all around, wrapping around me like a stranglehold. I turned slowly, scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shadows twisted into dark shapes, and the air felt charged with something I couldn't name. I took a cautious step back, focusing on the gurney in the corner. The second child was still there, unmoving, and it sent a wave of dread through me. I needed to get out, but the panic in my chest told me I couldn't simply bolt for the door. I had to help them first. Feeling the weight of the key in my pocket, I reached for it, my fingers trembling. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Tell me what I need to do." But silence answered, and the shadows seemed to creep closer, curling around my legs. Then I caught something in the flickering light. In the reflection of one of the scattered instruments on the floor, I saw movement. My breath hitched as I glanced back at the first child, expecting him to be gone, but he was still there, his gaze locking onto mine with desperation. "Look," he whispered, pointing towards the gurney again. "They need you. There's a secret." "What secret?" I felt a tremor in my voice, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and began to inch closer to the gurney, his movements almost mechanical. I followed, confusion grabbing at my thoughts as I crept behind him. As I kneeled beside the gurney, I noticed something I hadn't before, a small, rusty latch beneath it. My breath hung in my throat. I pushed back the gurney and examined the latch closely. It looked old and worn, but something told me it held a key to this madness. That was when I heard a soft whimper. I pressed my ear to the floor, trying to make sense of it. It came again, a child's voice, faint but unmistakable. "Help us, please." Every instinct flashed warning signs, but I was drawn to that sound like a moth to flame. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A cold breath brushed against the nape of my neck. Panic surged again, and I yanked away from the gurney, looking behind me. The air felt different, charged with an urgency that pressed against my chest. The shadows had thickened. They no longer danced. They loomed. "Open it." The child's voice came again, stronger this time. I glanced back down at the latch, heart racing. Could it really lead to something? Or would it just plunge me deeper into this nightmare? With a shaky breath, I reached for the latch. It felt cold to the touch, as if it had absorbed the darkness around it. I hesitated, fear clawing at my gut, but the whimper turned into a soft wail that crept under my skin. Just as I began to pull it up, the door burst open, and harsh light flooded the room. My muscles tensed in instinctual fight-or-flight mode, but when I turned, no one was there. I blinked, half expecting to see a figure materializing in the doorway, but there was only an empty corridor. Then I heard the whispers again, louder now, more demanding. "You have to save them." It was a cacophony of voices, urgency overwhelming me. I was torn, knowing I couldn't ignore them any longer. In that moment, I finally gripped the latch and yanked it up. The sound echoed like thunder in the stillness around me, a signal that set off something I couldn't predict. That's when I saw it. A small door beneath the gurney was swinging open, dark and ominous, revealing nothing but an inky void. My heart raced. Someone was waiting for me inside, and whatever it was, I knew it was more terrifying than the shadows surrounding me. Without another thought, I dove into the darkness, desperate to confront whatever lay ahead. As I plunged into the void, the air turned heavy, almost viscous, clinging to every inch of my skin. I gasped, the coldness wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. My mind spun wildly as I tried to process what was happening. Downward, I traveled in an inexplicable descent into a forgotten realm hidden beneath the hospital. Suddenly, I landed hard on a cold, concrete floor, the shock jolting through my bones. I pushed myself up and glanced around, my heart racing. The space was dark, illuminated only by flickering lights lining the walls. Shadows clawed at the edges, constantly shifting shapes that sent ice through my veins. "Help!" a small voice called softly, echoing through the emptiness. I clutched the key tightly, feeling its cool metal digging into my palm, and took a deep breath. "Who is there?" I shouted back, panic rising within me. The voice sounded weak, fragile, bursting through the chokehold of silence and prompting me to move forward. "Down here." I followed the sound, my pulse quickening. Moving deeper into the darkness, I squinted, trying to make out the figure that lay huddled against the far wall. In the dim light, I could see a small boy, no older than 6. His features were gaunt, eyes hollow and reflecting flickering glimmers of light. I rushed toward him. "Are you okay? What happened?" I kneeled at his side, urgency bubbling within me. "They took us," the boy whispered, voice shaking. "They want us to stay." His gaze fell to the shadows where the light slipped away into blackness. "Who?" I pressed, but before he could answer, the air thickened again, charged with static energy. I felt a chill running down my spine, as if something were behind me, lurking, waiting. "The darkness," he whimpered. "The others, they're trapped. You can't leave. I have to help you." I insisted, determination seeping through my fear. "Where? How?" He pointed to another small door across the room that barely clung to its hinges. "You have to unlock it first." With the key, I fumbled to retrieve it, heart thumping erratically in my chest. Panic warred with courage as I approached. As I inserted the key, I felt a tremor pulse through the floor beneath me. The door creaked open with an ominous groan. Inside, a swirling mist enveloped me, and I swore I heard soft cries, the sounds of children. I hesitated, glancing back at the boy, whose plea-filled eyes were locked on me. "Please," he whispered, desperation thickening his voice. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the door. The atmosphere shifted, instantly warmth flooded in, a strange contrast to the bone-chilling fear I felt. Before me lay a wide room filled with translucent figures, children floating just above the ground. Their features were unfocused. They seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, their mouths moving as if trapped in a cacophony of silent cries. "What do you want?" I blurted, panic prickling my skin. A soft breeze swept through the room, carrying with it murmurings of help, lost and together. I watched as they circled around me, their expressions reflecting anguish. The boy's voice came to me again, a faint echo. "You have to set them free." Questions tangled in my mind. Could I trust them? Each heartbeat felt like a choice. What if unlocking this door unleashed something worse? "I can't leave you all," I whispered, nudging forward into the room. The air grew heavier, the silence thickening, a sensation pulling against me. Suddenly, the figures stopped swirling and fell eerily still, their gazes locking onto me in haunting synchronicity. "Help us," they chorused, their silent pleas echoing in the temple of my heart. The intensity of their want crashed over me like another surge of icy breath, unyielding but impossibly fragile. My hands trembled as I gripped the key tightly. "How do I help you?" I called desperately, but no answer came. Instead, the whispers crescendoed into one unrelenting chant. Help with every ounce of courage. I moved to the center of the room, standing among them. I felt the weight of countless sad stories wrapped around me. It felt as if the shadows hovered. Closer, a restlessness brewing like a storm ready to break. Through the darkness stood a taller figure, obscured in the shadows, watching with a knowing smile that demanded recognition. Was it possible that this was the true source of suffering lurking in their world? "Your time is running out," it echoed, piercing through my ensnared thoughts. With a heavy heart, I realized I might face some unspeakable truth if I pushed for answers, but I had to try. "What do you want?" I shouted at the looming shadow figure. The room trembled, energy vibrating around me. But the echoes of help were relentless, pulling me toward a pivotal moment I had to confront. "Help us," the voices intensified, stretching out like a hand, and suddenly I knew these children were yearning for something that transcended natural questions. Perhaps they were trapped in a world they could no longer understand, as separate from their own needs had I unwittingly become their only bridge to escaping torment. But even as clarity dawned, a creeping dread knotted within me. I felt tethered in place, like a ship caught in a storm, teetering on the cusp of disaster as shadows encroached further. And in that moment, the way out of this tangled realm slipped through my fingers. Would I leave him behind? I turned to face the boy who had led me here. "Please," he cried, drawing me back to a vulnerable resolve. Tears stung my eyes as I stood among the ghostly children, realizing I could no longer doubt. "I'll help you," I shouted, the force of my conviction erupting. But what awaited behind the shadowed figure? That deeper darkness that waited to consume us all. I knew then that the shadows around me weren't just figments. They represented a question that could never quite be answered, a bridge between the living and the lost. Determination flared, and with a deep breath, I gripped the key tight. I held my ground as the mystery turned, the answer hiding in the vibrations of the air around me, knowing whatever came next would forever change not just me, but the fate of those seeking liberation. Together we would dance with that uncertainty until I uncovered the truth. But as I cast one last glance toward the shadows, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness held more than just suffering. It held lost pieces of life's untold stories, and perhaps some stories were never fully meant to be resolved.